Um, so thank you very much for coming on. Crime Spree magazine is honored to have best-selling authors known for their thriller books. Jack Carr is known for his James Reese series, he about a former Navy SEAL, and his latest is Savage Son. Kyle Mills has taken over the Mitch Rapp series about the CIA, and his latest is Total Power. So I guess my first question is, how do you get the ideas to make your stories realistic? I mean, because sometimes you watch thriller movies or read thriller books, and it's like, nah, I don't think so. So Kyle, we'll start with you, if you don't mind.
To me, that's kind of how my mind has always worked. I grew up in like an FBI family, which I guess is kind of like being in a military family. So I knew a lot of the people kind of that I write about. And for me, research has always, to some extent, written the book. I've never understood why writers want to make up too much stuff when there's so much amazing stuff already there in the world. So for me, I come up with a concept. So like my latest book, it's the terrorists managed to take out the power grid in the United States, and to some extent, your research will write that for you. You don't have to make it up. You figure out how would it happen. You go through all the government documents and stuff. How would I do it if I was a terrorist? If it happened, what would America be like? How would you catch these people? And so I think the realism of my books comes from just that. I like to create these alternate universes that feel like they could really be happening, as opposed to being like a sci-fi guy or a fantasy person who have to come up with an entire world. That seems like too much work.
Yeah, I agree. Jack, what about you?
Yeah. So first off, yeah, very similar. And I've been a fan of Kyle since before the Mitch Rapp series, from his work that he did well before taking over the Vince Flynn Mitch Rapp series. But very similar in that research does so much of the work for you. And for me, it's coming up with that theme. And the first one, The Terminalist, was really a book about revenge without constraint. And then I moved into the second novel, which was a story of redemption and transitions. And then the third one was really about the dark side of man in Savage Son. And the one I'm working on now is something that I've been thinking about for, well, personally and professionally for so many years. And it is, what has the enemy, or what would I, if I was the enemy, what lessons would I be taking away from what I've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan over what has almost been now 20 years at war? So if I'm Iran, what am I learning? If I'm North Korea, what am I learning? If I'm China, what am I learning? If I'm Russia, what am I learning? If I'm a super empowered individual or a terrorist organization, what lessons am I learning from essentially watching two teams play, knowing that one day I'm going to play one of those teams? And so that's how I started this fourth novel called The Devil's Hand. And then well before COVID started, I was doing research into bioweapon systems, into bioweapon vaccines, and the history of bioweapons.
We'll get to your future books, because that's like going to be one of our things that we want to discuss. I guess my question is, do you guys feel pressure in like saying, do I have to invent something out in the future? Because like if I talk about something like maybe a virus, it might come out and then it's like my whole story is kind of defeated. So what do you think, Jack?
So I don't, I don't let that, I think you could spend all your time worried about that if you put that at the forefront of your mind. So I don't think really about that at all. I don't worry about something coming out of the news and then all of a sudden, oh, my story's not going to make sense, or now it's not timely or anything. I don't really think about that at all. I just explore themes that I want to explore, and then take the emotions and experience and feelings behind certain events I was involved with in similar situations and apply them to a completely fictional narrative. So I just immerse myself in the story and in that research, like Kyle said, and I love every part of that process. So I don't spend time worried about any of it.
What about you, Kyle?
It kind of depends on the book. Say Iran, for instance, when the Trump administration came in, I kind of felt like Iran was probably off the table because I was concerned that we might start a war with them. And then if you were to had some sneaky stuff going on in Iran, it would really be overtaken by history. So if I'm going to do something like that, I am concerned about it. I did just write a book about a coronavirus, but it came out fortunately before COVID. So if it's a really big themed thing, so if you're doing grand themes like Jack has done, so the idea is revenge. It's based on that character. How do they feel about what happened to their family? What are they going to do about it? These are classic themes that are very deeply rooted in a character. But if you're going to do a grand thing like we're going to go to war with Iran or something like that, then I think a little bit about could I be overtaken by history?
Hmm. So, what about what's important to you when you guys write a thriller? I mean, is it the characters, the plot, the setting, something else, all of the above, none of the above? So, what do you think, Kyle?
Um, that's really evolved with me. I got into writing because I was really fascinated with plots. It goes back to what we were talking about before with I come up with this idea. So the first one I had wrote, I had this big idea that somebody would poison the US narcotics supply to try to stop the proliferation of narcotics. People would just stop taking them because they knew they might be poisoned, right? And then I built on that. What would happen if somebody did that? How would they do that? And I was really fascinated with plots and technology and where the world was going, and how it would affect society. And then I think I've come around to not believe that anymore. To believe that it's all about your character. And it's great to have a really cool plot. You got to have that. It's got to be fun and all that stuff. But what attracts readers, and I'm included in this, to a book is they're interested in that character. That character is real to them. They feel that character feels alive and they feel connected to them. And you'd be better off writing 4 pages about a great character mowing his lawn than a terrible character, doing the most interesting stuff in the world.
And Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've been a student. I didn't realize put it in these terms back then, but I've been a student of this genre really all my life. Just growing up, reading books by Nelson DeMille and David Morrell and Robert Ludlum and A.J. Quinnell and J.C. Pollock and Mark Olden and all these guys who had protagonists with backgrounds that I wanted to have in real life one day. And yes, I remember those plots and I remember some of the settings and all that, but I remember the characters. And the characters that I naturally gravitated to in books and in film were characters that were likable. There was something there, I identified with them somehow. I wanted to be like them, or there was something, there was a connection there. So when I started down this path, that was at the forefront of my mind. When I created James Reese and started writing The Terminal List, I knew that he had to be a likable character for people to identify with him and then want to learn more about him, want to know what was going to happen next, and then care about what happened to him and his family and his teammates throughout the course of the novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of characters, so Kyle, I'd like you to talk about how would you describe, Kyle knows that I am partial, so I'm going to have you talk to characters, Mitch Rapp and Irene Kennedy, Dr. Irene Kennedy. How would you describe them and the importance that they have to the story?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there are two kind of halves that make this whole. Kennedy's the intellectual kind of driving force behind the book. She's the director of the CIA, and Mitch is kind of the sharp end, who gets things done out in the field. And there really are incredible characters that these were created originally by Vince, and we've seen them grow, which is what's so fascinating about this series. It's so long that it goes from when Mitch was in college and Irene was quite young and not the CIA director to now, he's 44, she's like 50, and we've gotten to see what they've become and why they've become what they have. So a really, going back to speaking about character, it's really cool to do a book. Like I did a book called Fade that was very much about this one very crazy sort of character, and people really liked that character, but it's one book. I mean, and what's really fun about these series is, that Jack's embarking on now, that you can follow this character for 20 years and really know them. And I know Mitch better than any character I've ever written because there's so much more ink about him than any character I ever created.
Yeah. And what about you, Jack?
For the characters,
Yeah, like your main character is James Reese. So, you
so he
know,
has a background that's very similar to mine, except he is much better at everything than I ever was. So he's a better shot. He's better at jujitsu. He's a better boxer. He's faster. He's stronger. He's better shot. All these things, much wittier. But it helped having some of those experiences, and I think that's what made it stand out to Simon and Schuster, and why it's resonated with readers, is that when someone's reading this, the feelings and emotions are things that I felt at some point along the way, and I just took those and I applied them to this completely fictional narrative. So if it feels real and raw as someone's reading it, that's because it comes from a real and raw place. I didn't have to interview a Navy SEAL sniper going into Ramadi in 2005 and 2006 and ask him, how did it feel to be behind the glass during that time frame? I can just go back there, I can remember, I can think about it, and then I can apply it to this fictional narrative. So for me, it's helped. It's been very therapeutic, and it's helped me develop this character in a way that I hope humanizes him for readers.
yeah. So, okay. So let's talk a little about your latest, Savage Son. So he's just had a surgery, right? A brain tumor, if I,
That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Nice.
And he's being chased by the Russian mafia, or they're coming after him. Um, Expand on that. What?
So this is the book that I wanted to write first. When I sat down and I wrote 6, 7, 8 different ideas down before I embarked on this process, this is the one I wanted to write. But I knew that the characters weren't developed and weren't at a place yet where I could explore the themes of Savage Son. And so I knew that I had to start with the terminal list. I had to introduce readers to this character, James Reese, and a few other characters as well. I had to further develop him in the second novel, in True Believer, to get to that place where I could write Savage Son. And I've been thinking about Savage Son since the 6th grade when I read The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. We read it in school and I loved it. I watched the old black and white film, and I kept going back to that book, back to those themes over and over again. And I knew back then that one day I'd write a modern thriller that paid tribute to The Most Dangerous Game. And by the time I finished True Believer, I knew it was time. The characters were ready to explore that dark side of man through the dynamic of hunter and hunted in Savage Son. So that's the background. So it's the one I've been thinking about for quite some time.
Cool. And Kyle, we talked about it. It's the electrical grid of the U.S. is like taken out, like, and not just like one state or one area. It's like all the U.S. And so I wonder if you can expand on that a little.
Yeah, so this is just another one of my fascination with these big technical idea, what if situations. My background actually strangely is in economics, and economists think about, well, if you take these factors, what happens to the world, and you can change the variables and all this stuff. And I've still loved doing that. So with this one, it was kind of inspired by a book I had written years ago about kind of power generation and a potential attack on it. But my character saves the day. And I always thought, what if he hadn't? What if you started the book kind of with the failure of the power grid? And then what would happen to America? How would and I follow all kinds of different people, Mitch Rapp, but also more like normal people. Like, how would they deal with the fact that there's no power, no light, no heat, the water is starting to go out, the grocery stores are empty, all these kinds of things. And so for me, that was a lot of fun to build. It's a little like working with fantasy, maybe, where you have to build this world that you've never seen before in a realistic way, step by step. And then, of course, try to figure out how to put it back together again, because, you don't want to have, your guy always has to win in the end in a thriller.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I'm curious about the fact that Kyle, you took over a series. So how hard was that? Was that like hard when you had to take over the Vince Flynn? Were you easily accepted into the Vince Flynn fan crowd? And
Yeah, I mean, I was really worried about that because they could have all kinds of different attitudes. Fans could, as personally as a fan of Vince, when he passed away, I thought, oh, I hope that they have somebody take that over who's good, because Mitch just was left hanging. I thought at least have somebody write one more book and he dies in some fiery explosion or something, some kind of closure for me. And I didn't know if other people would feel that way. So it was one of the things that I really wrestled with when I decided whether I wanted to take the job or not, if I was just going to be just creamed with hate mail. And I took the job, and I actually remember telling my wife, okay, here comes the hate mail. I'm pretty thick skinned after being in this business for so long, but, and it never materialized. Everybody was fired up. A lot of my fans were also Vince's fans, and everybody really wanted to see Vince's legacy carry on and to see what happened to Mitch. I mean, like, Jack and I was saying, and I was saying earlier, these people become very real to fans, to me, if I'm a fan, and, they're friends of yours that you visit once a year, and to just have them disappear is a little like having somebody disappear.
Right. And so Jack, with you, you have your SEAL background that influenced you into what brought you into writing? I mean, why did you say I'm going to kind of write a character similar to myself, if where there are similarities?
Right. So I knew that I was going to do this from a very early age. There were two things I wanted to do, and one was serve my country in uniforms, specifically as a SEAL, and then was to write fiction. And a lot of it is because of those people that I mentioned earlier and those protagonists that they had back in the 80s and 90s. And I knew that one day I would want to write novels like that and give other people that same experience, that same magic that I had reading those books growing up. I wanted to do that same thing one day. So I knew it had to come after my time in the military, just because age-wise, you have to go in the military first. And I didn't look at it like this at the time, but all that study that I did, all that reading that I did, that was study. Then all the academic reading and study that I did on insurgencies and terrorism and warfare and counterinsurgencies, well, that was another part of this pyramid. And then going downrange as a SEAL to Iraq and Afghanistan and having that training and that experience, well, all of those things came together at the right time and place. They all overlapped and allowed me to make this transition from military service into the world of publishing and do something that I'm passionate about and that I love and that I've always wanted to do. So all of that thing, I can't imagine waking up one day and saying, I think I'm going to be a writer. And be like, oh, what should I go back and read? Well, I had this whole life of reading those things, thanks to my mom, who was a librarian, and being being introduced to those books so early on and having a relationship with all those novels. So it's for me, I can't think of a better way to have transitioned and moved forward than to have grown up reading those books, watching movie adaptations of some of those novels, doing that academic study of warfare, going downrange in the SEAL teams, and then moving in to writing these thrillers. So I feel very fortunate.
So let's talk about your next book now. So we'll start with you, Jack. Can you give us a little shout out about when it's coming out, a title, what it's about?
I sure can. The Devil's Hand comes out April 13th, 2021. And I just finished it not too long ago, and I'm in the editing process now. So now I want to come back to it and try to read it through the eyes of someone who is experiencing it for the first time, because I've been intimately involved with it for over a year now. I've thought about the questions for a lot longer, that it explores for a lot longer than that. So now I have to come to it with these eyes of, hey, if I'm someone reading this for the first time, maybe I've read one other novel, maybe I haven't, maybe I've read the first three, and what is that experience like for them? So now it's time to apply that vision, that lens to it over the next few weeks here, get it where it needs to be, and then on to book 5. But yeah, it explores what the enemy would have learned from us in Iraq and Afghanistan, what they would have applied to their battle plan if they were going to hit us while we're down.
do they hit us in our home territory, or do they just hit our troops
Yeah,
in?
this is a back to the United States home soil attack, and which was actually helpful in that for the other books, I went to Russia to research Savage Son. I went to the Kamchatka Peninsula just south of Siberia because a lot of the book was going to take place there. For the other ones, I went to South Africa. I went to Mozambique. I helped train up an anti-poaching unit protecting rhino in South Africa because I wanted to take some of those lessons there and apply them to my novels. But for this one, I'd been to most of the places already because it takes place mostly in the United States. So that was very helpful because of COVID and not being able to travel during this time frame. So that was very good. So you have an attack on home soil by an enemy who's been studying us, not just for those last 20 years, but also looking at what we did in that lead up to 9/11, the 20 years from 1979 up until 9/11, taking things that worked, that didn't, adapting, and then hitting us hard now while we're down.
Yeah, what is that? What's that statement about terrorists? That they have a long memory and a long life, while us Americans are impatient and expect everything in a very short period.
Yeah, exactly. Not just terrorists either. Some other companies with countries with very long histories that think in generational terms rather than 4-year terms.
Right. Kyle, what about you? What's the next book going to be about? And do you have a title?
Yeah, that will come out next year, like in September, typically. No title yet. We're not quite sure about that. This is going to be, very much about the divisions in America and the kind of political turmoil we're in. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to embrace that or run away from it. And probably the smart money would be to run away from it. But it's just too interesting. So my plan is kind of to do a 3-book arc in this setting that's about America kind of, in its current position, sort of tearing itself apart and moving into maybe another era. And of course, they'll have each book will have individual plots and threats and things like that. But I'm interested in that setting, and also in doing a 3-book arc, which is not something I'd really done before, but that Vince was kind of known for arcing stories over multiple books.
You mean like separation of power, executive power, and third option?
Yeah, where you have a really strong, even when I took over, with The Survivor, The Last Man had not really ended. I mean, he had that very minimum arc had ended, but there was certainly a grander arc that was going to continue. So that was a continuation. You could almost read those 2 books as one really long book.
So is the bad guy going to be the president, or can you tell us that, or is it?
Oh, there are lots of bad guys. Okay. There's never a lack of bad guys to follow. So, I mean, yeah. So what you do have is a new president, which I had set up in the last book, that you're going to have a new president coming in, and that he is a pretty bad guy, not like the presidents that Mitch has worked with before. And Mitch is getting a little long in the tooth, and he's trying to figure out if he wants to, get involved with another president, train another president or not.
Right. Yeah. Well, I remember with Vince, never a president, but senators and congressmen and, whatnot, or congresswomen were always kind of bad.
Yeah, it was a big theme in his books, the nasty politician, for sure.
Yeah, my husband's always saying, I think we need Vince's term limits right now. So, okay, so time is unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, just a few minutes. But is there anything that either one of you want to add or say that wasn't asked about the thriller genre, your books, or anything else? So, Jack, we'll start with you.
Well, I will say, just jumping onto that last thread there, in that I did get to meet Vince Flynn and spend some time with him at an event before he passed away. And we spent a good solid 45 minutes together because it took so long to get out of this venue, and we walked together. And I asked him, hey, do you ever worry that you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to flip open and I said newspaper, at the time, this was a while back, and then you're going to see that someone has done something very similar to what you write about in Term Limits. And I'll never forget it. He said he wakes up every morning and thinks about that, is what he told me. So that was impactful, and I'll always be grateful for that time that I got to spend with him. And then I want to say thank you to Kyle and to everyone else in this industry that has really welcomed me with open arms. It's not something that I expected, because I didn't have any other experience besides the military. And as I transitioned out and into this other industry, everyone has been so nice, so kind, so welcoming, and I'll never forget that either. So thank you.
And Kyle, is there anything you'd like to add or say about any of the characters or anything?
Well, I mean, I guess I'd say thank you too. You know, I mean, I've been very, very lucky that Vince's fans, Vince's family, his friends have all been so great to me, that everybody has always been rooting for me, and they've been super kind about allowing me to take the series kind of where I want it to. And, you know, all the support I've had from other authors too. I don't think people really, I think people see it more now with social media, but one of the great things about being a thriller writer, maybe it's true in other genres too, is it's not hyper competitive. We all, you know, it's not a zero-sum game. Just because I sell a bunch of books doesn't mean I took them from, you know, fans from Jack. So we all get to support each other and read each other's stuff and inspire each other. And it makes for a really fun job. Whereas I mean, some jobs, you know, you have to fight everybody all the time, you know?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. That's it. It's nice when you have people that you can work with that don't try to get political and, you know, stab you in the back kind of attitude. Well, I can tell you both that as a fan, we love your books. So, you know, we hope you continue writing forever and ever and ever. And, you know, that your characters live on. So, because it's nice to be able to read your books and have those characters as people that we can look up to in our own, you know, country. So thank you for that. So and have a very happy, well, have a good holiday season. I don't know, we'll take the happy out of it, but have a good holiday season and a healthy one to both of you. And thank you so much for doing this. It was very much appreciated.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys take care.
You too.
You too.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.